Welcome, everyone. I'm Dr. Donna Reece, and I'm joined now by Dr. Ajai Chari, who is our international guest ambassador. We are all aware of the exciting results of adding Daratumumab to first-line treatment in transplant-ineligible patients. Dr. Chari will be discussing abstract number 549, which updates the results of adding Daratumumab to initial treatment in transplant-eligible patients.
Thank you, Dr. Reece, for the kind invitation. Full disclosure, I am a co-author on this abstract. And the question being asked here is, if you add DARA to the most common induction regimen in the US, what are the benefits of that, which is DARA to the addition of RVD? We already know from Cassiopeia in Europe that the addition of DARA to VTD shows not only an improved depth of response, but also PFS at a relatively short follow-up of 18 months. So here, DARA was given an induction, then patients had transplant, followed by consolidation, and then DARA was continued throughout the consolidation and maintenance for 2 years, whereas the control arm got no DARA. And the primary endpoint was stringent CR, and here we're getting additional follow-up at 27.4 months.
What do you think are the highlights from this presentation?
Well, the stringent CR had already been met, and that's been published in Blood. With the additional follow-up, we see that the stringent CR rates were higher, and percentage-wise higher in the DARA-containing arm. So 63.6% versus 47.4%. Importantly, we also saw that MRD difference was maintained, and what I'm always looking for is sustained MRD, and here sustained MRD at 12 months or longer was 28.8% versus 2.9% in the control arm. And so those are encouraging. With the current follow-up, no differences in PFS and OS from a median perspective, but the 24-month PFS was trending 94.5% with the DARA arm versus 90.8% in the control arm. No new safety signals, as expected, increased rates of neutropenia with the addition of DARA.
What do you think the impact of these findings will be for the practicing hematologist?
I guess the first question is, what are our options for induction? So we have KRD, VRD, and DARA VRD, or DARA KRD theoretically. And I think the endurance study showed us that without the intent for transplant, KRD and VRD were essentially comparable in efficacy. And if that's in standard risk, it's harder to believe that that would do any better in high risk, because usually if a regimen works for high risk, it should work better even for standard risk. So then the question is, do we do VRD or do we add the DARA? And I think that depends on whether you're an early adopter or not. The Cassiopeia would suggest that we do see not only depth, but PFS benefit. We may need longer follow-up here because the VRD arm is more potent. And so we'll stay tuned. But if you believe in MRD as a surrogate, I think we're seeing the hint here that the MRD negativity is deepening and sustaining and should portend well for the benefit of DARA. And I think for the US, this bodes well if people are early adopters. But I welcome the Canadian perspective on this.
Well, of course, we are always mindful of the impact of cost on the healthcare system, but given the obvious advantages of adding a CD38 antibody in an effort to bring this to our patients as soon as possible, we will be embarking on another CMRG national trial soon that adds the other CD38 antibody, isatuximab, to our national platform of CyBorD transplant lenalidomide maintenance. So ISA will be given through induction and then post-transplant with lenalidomide for 2 years. We also have the advantage that in our country, Bortezomib is generic and lenalidomide will become generic very soon. So I think it puts this strategy within our reach, given our healthcare resources. Thank you so much for your perspective.